Oh, buckle up. Because Joe Rogan just did what Joe Rogan does best, dropped a truth grenade right in the middle of Candace Owens' latest firestorm. And this time, the target isn't just politics, it's personal. The debate over Charlie Kirk's widow, Erika, just went from awkward to thermonuclear. Candace says she's uncovering truth, Rogan says she's losing the plot, and the internet? Oh, the internet's making popcorn. Let's break it down. The explosive facts that'll make you rethink everything about this saga. The podcast clash heard around the internet. It started the way all modern explosions do, with a casual podcast that wasn't casual at all. Joe Rogan, the self-proclaimed voice of reason in a world that's completely lost its mind, versus Candace Owens, the lightning rod of conservative commentary. Two people who can make the internet melt just by sharing oxygen. They sat across from each other like chess players who both think they're grandmasters, sipping coffee, smiling politely, and loading intellectual ammo. Rogan opened softly, talking about performative truth, that viral age of influencers, politicians, and preachers who sell sincerity like it's merch. The crowd listening could feel where this was going, and then Joe leaned in, dropped his mic knife of a line. You don't have to have an opinion on everything. Boom. Silence. You could practically hear Twitter stretch its fingers. Candace smirked, tilted her head slightly, and fired back without missing a beat. Yeah, but when the whole thing smells like a cover-up, I'm not gonna pretend it's air freshener. The studio cracked. Rogan laughed, but not out of humor. Out of recognition. That moment when two alpha commentators realize they're not debating for understanding, they're debating for dominance. What started as a philosophical chat about information spiraled into a collision of ideologies. Rogan stood on data, evidence, the prove it or park it philosophy. Candace, though, came in with conviction, the gut-driven faith that something wasn't right about Charlie Kirk's death, that the official story was cleaner than reality ever is. Joe tried to rein it in, saying, "But Candace, you can't just throw accusations without receipts." Candace shot back, "And you can't ignore the smoke just because you don't see the fire." The internet exploded. Within hours, clips of the exchange were all over X, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. Hashtags like #RoganVazowens and #TruthShowdown trended for 2 straight days. Comment sections turned into digital battlefields. Team Candace calling Rogan a corporate skeptic. Team Joe calling Candace a professional dramatist. And here's the best part. It didn't even matter who was right. What mattered was that it was electric. It was that kind of unpredictable tension that makes you pause mid-scroll and say, wait, did she just say that on Rogan's show? For Candace, it wasn't just a disagreement. It was a declaration. She was positioning herself not as the grieving friend, but as the lone truth teller fighting the system. For Rogan, it wasn't confrontation, it was containment. He was trying to be the guy who says, hold up, let's not go full conspiracy yet, while his audience was already halfway down the rabbit hole. That clash, it set the tone for everything that came next. The leaks, the theories, the chaos. Because the second those two voices collided, the conversation stopped being about Charlie Kirk's tragedy and started being about something way bigger. Who gets to define reality when everyone's selling their version of it? And just when you thought that podcast couldn't possibly get more explosive, Rogan didn't just challenge Candace's theories. He dismantled the entire foundation of her argument. Which brings us straight to fact 2. Rogan's accusation. The moment the room went cold. Rogan's accusation. So here's where things went from podcast banter to live fire interrogation. Joe Rogan leaned forward, elbows on the table, that signature "I'm not buying it" look on his face. The same one he uses right before he dismantles someone's argument molecule by molecule. He paused, long enough to make even Candace blink. Then with that calm, unsettling tone he's mastered, Rogan asked the question that made the entire studio feel like it just dropped 10 degrees. Candace, are you saying you know something, or are you saying you want to believe something? Boom, that's the moment. The oxygen left the room. Candace froze for half a second. You could see the gears turning behind that perfect composure. She knew this wasn't just a question. This was an accusation wrapped in curiosity. Rogan wasn't calling her a liar, not yet, but he was accusing her of something much subtler, narrative manipulation. Because here's the thing, in Rogan's world, I feel like doesn't cut it. He deals in evidence, timestamps, and sources. In Candace's world though, instinct is currency. She runs on gut reactions that turn into movements, not spreadsheets. So when Rogan dropped that line, what he was really saying was, are you chasing the truth or chasing attention? Candace's smile stiffened. You know that look people give right before they switch from defensive to defiant? Yeah, that. She leaned in and said, Joe, when 3 people close to someone say they warned he'd be killed the day before, that's not a feeling. That's a fact people are ignoring. Rogan didn't flinch. He shot back, but that's not your fact, Candace. That's someone else's rumor. The tension? Palpable. The kind that makes you want to grab popcorn and pray the mics don't cut out. It wasn't just disagreement. It was philosophical warfare. Logic versus intuition. Skepticism versus conviction. And the best part? Neither of them blinked. Rogan's voice stayed calm, measured, deadly in its precision. You've got to be careful. Once you start filling in blanks with emotion, you're not investigating anymore. You're storytelling. Candace fired back. Or maybe, Joe, I'm doing what journalists used to do before everyone was scared of the truth. That line hit like a right hook. Even Joe had to sit back and grin. The kind of grin that says, all right, she's not folding. But then came the turning point, the moment fans now call the cold snap. Rogan looked her dead in the eye and said, Candace, if you're wrong, you realize you're playing with someone's legacy, right? Silence. Not podcast silence. TV silence. That deep, heavy kind that makes you check your Wi-Fi. Candace's expression went flat. Her voice dropped lower, sharper. Then maybe the people protecting that legacy should be more worried about the truth than about their image. That's when you knew the debate wasn't about Charlie Kirk anymore. It was about who owns the truth. The philosopher versus the provocateur. The skeptic versus the storyteller. And in that single exchange, Rogan didn't just challenge Candace. He exposed the fault line running through modern commentary itself. The age-old battle between facts that can be proven and truths that feel real. Twitter exploded again. Rogan fans said he called her bluff. Owens fans said he tried to silence her. Everyone else, they just replayed the clip like it was a prize fight. And whether you agreed with Joe or Candace didn't even matter. Because that accusation, that subtle surgical strike of a question, turned a simple interview into a cultural litmus test. Who do you trust more? The person who demands evidence or the one who swears their gut never lies? But if you thought that was intense, just wait until you see how Candace flipped the entire mood of the show right after. Because in fact, 3, the clapback heard across the studio, she doesn't just defend herself. She turns Rogan's logic against him in the most unexpected way. Candace's secret messages. After her tense exchange with Joe Rogan, Candace Owens didn't fight back with words. She fought back with mystery. Instead of arguing, she dropped a cryptic message on X that read, "The truth always sends a message, and not everyone can read it." That single post ignited the internet, sparking the hashtag #OwensCode as fans dissected every pixel like it was a secret prophecy. Then came the twist. Her podcast editor revealed the same phrase had appeared in a private chat linked to the people she'd hinted knew more about Charlie Kirk's final hours. Days later, Candace doubled down with a carefully chosen Bible verse about hidden truths being revealed, staring into the camera just long enough to make it feel personal. When she suddenly followed a whistleblower journalist and a Turning Point donor she'd once blocked, speculation exploded. Was Candace exposing something or expertly baiting the internet into thinking she was? Either way, she flipped the script, transforming suspicion into strategy. Rogan debated facts. Candace built mythology. And in today's attention economy, mystery isn't chaos, it's power. And then she went there, dragging Trump's name right into the storm. Candace loses faith in Trump. Candace Owens' public break from Donald Trump unfolded less like a political shift and more like a televised heartbreak. Raw, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. During a somber live stream about the Charlie Kirk controversy, she quietly confessed that the ordeal had made her lose faith in politics and, honestly, in Trump. A single line that detonated across social media and split her audience in two. For someone once seen as Trump's fiercest defender, it felt like watching a loyal soldier lay down her sword. Candace explained that she wasn't turning on conservatism, but rejecting what she called political idolatry, accusing the movement of protecting power while silencing truth. She revealed private attempts to contact Trump's team about Charlie's death that were met with total silence. The final betrayal that pushed her over the edge. Soon after, she deleted pro-Trump tweets, unfollowed key allies, and declared she would no longer defend the indefensible. Her calm defiance, capped with the line, "If standing for truth costs me every friend in politics, I'll still be standing." wasn't just rebellion, it was emancipation. Candace didn't just leave Trump's shadow, she burned it, turning her loss of faith into the next act of her political reinvention. But the real shocker wasn't emotional, it was forensic. The bullet that didn't match. Candace claimed investigators found a fragment in Charlie's neck that didn't match the weapon they said was used. The rifle, an antique World War I gun from the suspect's grandfather, Candace. Different size, different alloy, different everything. Translation, the official story might be faker than a Hollywood accent. Rogan actually paused and said, if that's true, that's huge. Yeah, Joe, that's kind of the point. And then came the weirdest twist yet, straight out of a Netflix docuseries. The mystery man. During the chaos, a random older guy allegedly started yelling nonsense. Some say he even dropped his pants. Now here's where it gets Twilight Zone. The same man has been spotted at other major tragedies. 9/11s, Boston bombing, you name it. Joe Rogan. When the same guy shows up at every disaster, that's not coincidence. That's casting. Internet detectives went wild. Some saying he's a government plant, others calling him the world's unluckiest tourist. Either way, the story just got stranger. And while chaos brewed online, mainstream media did what it always does best: confuse everyone. The media spin MSNBC went live and said maybe the whole thing was a celebratory shot gone wrong, you know? Like Independence Day meets CSI Rogan nearly choked. What is this, the 4th of July on a college campus? It was a masterclass in distraction, turning tragedy into clickbait. Candace called it intentional confusion, Rogan called it mental gymnastics, and everyone else called it Tuesday. But this next part, this is where Rogan and Candace hit philosophical territory. Instinct versus evidence. This part of the story played out like a courtroom drama between intuition and cold, hard data, a showdown between gut instinct and verifiable proof. On one side were the instinct crowd, watching Erika's calm demeanor, cryptic posts, and perfect timing like detectives spotting clues in a psychological thriller, convinced that behavior speaks louder than evidence. On the other side stood the evidence purists, refusing to budge without receipts, metadata, call records, digital headers, timestamps, and chain of custody logs. It became a digital tug of war where instincts screamed cover up, while analysts calmly replied, attach the PDF. But the truth, as always, sat somewhere in the tension between both. Instincts are smoke alarms. They don't prove a fire, but they tell you where to look. And evidence is the hose that either puts it out or shows there was never one to begin with. By the end, the debate wasn't about who was right, it was about who could prove it. And that's when viewers realized this wasn't just about one scandal, it was about how the internet itself now decides what's real. But for once, Rogan and Candace both made sense. The middle ground nobody wants in the chaos of the Erika, Charlie, Candace, Rogan saga. The internet split into warring camps. Candace's followers chasing divine justice, and Rogan's fans dissecting it all like detached scientists. But somewhere in between was a tiny, unwelcome patch of gray called nuance. That middle ground was filled with people who weren't screaming for clicks or spinning theories, just quietly cross-checking evidence, reading court filings, and admitting the hardest truth of all: sometimes we just don't know yet. But in a world addicted to outrage, maybe doesn't trend. Both sides weaponized their certainty. Candace with faith, Rogan with skepticism, while the moderates were branded as traitors to both. Independent journalists called it digital entropy, not a cover-up, just too many people shouting to see clearly. And in that noise, the real truth, unflashy, inconvenient, human, could only survive in the one place the algorithm hates most: the middle. But even neutrality, as it turned out, wasn't safe, because the moment it tried to calm the storm, both sides turned their fire inward. And that leads us to the final unspoken fact, the one everyone's missing. The real battle isn't about truth. Here's the twist nobody wants to hear. The real fight between Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, and the political circus orbiting Charlie Kirk's death. It's not about finding the truth, it's about owning it. Welcome to the influencer war zone, where facts are just props, truth is negotiable, and perception is the only real currency that matters. Let's be honest. In 2025, outrage is the economy. Candace and Rogan aren't just debating what's real, they're competing for who gets to narrate it first. Every quote, every clip, every exclusive leak isn't just commentary, it's content. And content means clicks, clicks mean reach, and reach means power. This isn't journalism journalism, it's narrative capitalism. Candace knows this game better than anyone. She doesn't drop evidence, she drops energy. Her posts don't prove, they provoke. Whether she's quoting scripture or deleting old Trump tweets, she's not just telling her followers what to think, she's telling them how to feel. It's political theater disguised as divine revelation. When she says, "I've lost faith in politics," it's not just confession, it's marketing. She's rebranding disillusionment into defiance, wrapping vulnerability in virality. Joe Rogan, on the other hand, plays the counterweight, the skeptic monk of the modern media monastery. He doesn't shout, he shrugs. His weapon isn't faith, it's doubt. And that makes him equally powerful in a system where "I don't buy it" spreads faster than "here's proof." His audience doesn't need certainty, they just need to believe he's the only one asking real questions. In that sense, Rogan and Candace are two sides of the same influencer coin. One sells conviction, the other sells caution. Both sell trust, but here's where it gets deeper. Their audiences aren't just consuming these narratives, they're participating in them. Every repost, every "she's right" comment, every Reddit breakdown turns the viewer into part of the story. The truth stops being a goal and becomes a collaboration. So the line between witness and player blurs until everyone's part of the performance. And the media, they love it. Outlets amplify the chaos because polarization is profitable. Candace versus Rogan isn't news. It's the algorithm's dream. It's content that feeds itself, a self-sustaining loop where outrage keeps the lights on. By the time fact checkers show up, the narrative has already evolved, mutated into something more clickable, more emotional, and definitely less true. The real tragedy, the truth doesn't vanish, it just gets priced out. When everything becomes entertainment, honesty loses its market value. Candace doesn't need to be right if she can be relatable. Rogan doesn't need proof if he can be persuasive. In the attention economy, accuracy is optional, but engagement is mandatory. And that's the paradox at the heart of this saga. It's not truth versus lies, it's performance versus performance. One built on righteous conviction, the other on calculated doubt. Both feeding an audience that doesn't actually want clarity, they want confirmation. So when you zoom out, you realize the real battle isn't over facts or evidence, it's over narrative dominance. Who gets the final cut in the documentary of public opinion? And in that fight, nobody's incentivized to end the drama, because the drama is the business model. But what happens when the story finally outgrows its creators? When the audience stops cheering and starts investigating? Because the narrative collapse, the game of who controls the truth takes a turn, and the storytellers start losing control of their own script. So here's the real question. Are we watching a murder mystery or a media circus pretending to solve one? Drop your thoughts below. I read every theory, even the wild ones. And if you're still here, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because the next chapter in this saga, it's about to get even louder.